Yes, down here at the Newcastle Workers Club there's an eerie feeling. It's not as rushed and as panicked as it was yesterday afternoon when the quake hit, but hundreds of rescue workers are here getting the job done. They worked till about 1:30 last night pulling cars and rubble and bodies out of the mess, but after that period they realised it was unsafe, so they started to brace up the building. From about 7:30 this morning, work has started again. More cars have been coming out. The experts fear that there might be more bodies inside the wreck. At the moment we have 9 dead and there were 106 people injured in probably Newcastle's worst ever tragedy. We spoke to Inspector Ian Parks this morning and he's got a full rundown on the tragedy.
The situation at the moment, there are 3 people have been killed in the Hamilton area, and the current situation is that we've got 3 females and 2 males that have been taken from the Workers Club, and there are some other persons that are possibly trapped underneath.
Do we know how many?
No, there's an indeterminable number at the moment. Indeterminable number?
There's something that could be as many as 21.
Yeah, I can't comment on the exact number. We're trying to get to the floor that they're on, and as soon as they're located, we'll let you know.
Which floor are they on?
It's unsure. There's 3 floors that have collapsed onto one.
What's your tactic this morning in terms of clean up here at the Workers Club, sir?
Well, it's as has been going most of the night, and we've set up a mobile field control. We've got all the voluntary organisations, we've got council engineers, and we're gradually sifting through the rubble to try and get to the bottom floor and to excavate or eradicate those that are remaining.
First Light gave rescuers a chance to assess the extent of the task ahead of them. Already it was known that 32 cars were in the ground level parking lot when the upper floors crashed down, caving into the basement. Most of the vehicles were recovered, but 5 remained deep in a corner of the cellar under a slab of concrete. Also unaccounted for, 21 people. Rescuers believe they heard sounds coming from the rubble before dawn, but a cave rescue team sent into the tangled debris couldn't verify the report.
There's a lot of large machinery there, poker machines and a safe door, some toilet cubicles, but the site is a scene of absolute devastation inside there.
How far could you go?
We go right to the back of the building, but the slabs have fallen on top of each other in there, and there is a fair...
Was there any sign of anybody down there?
No, there's no sign of anybody alive that we could find. Our job was to go into the small spaces in between the slabs and on the brick walls to see if there was anybody trapped in small spaces that we could locate.
At the peak of this morning's rescue efforts, almost 300 personnel were on site, from police and ambulance officers to heavy machinery operators and volunteer rescue crews. State Coroner Kevin Waller was among the first officials to visit the Workers Club. He expressed the bewilderment of so many Australians at the seemingly endless saga of tragedy.
Yet another disaster. I'm soaking up the punishment at the moment. It just seems to be one disaster in New South Wales after another, but this one is even more astonishing, I think, than the others. So I've come up just to have a look, to satisfy myself with what's going on, to try and see what can be done to in disaster situations, to gather as much information as we can to see how these things affect people. I'm afraid there's not much we can do to prevent future happenings.
So you'll be the first coroner in Australia, at least, to be investigating deaths from an earthquake.
Well, that's unfortunately true, yes.
Bishop of Newcastle, the Right Reverend Alfred Holland, reacted more personally to the earthquake aftermath.
I lost a son in a road accident when he was 17, so I can appreciate with some of the numbness and pain that people are in. But there's no answer to some of these questions that we have.
State Premier Nick Greiner and local ministers also inspected the clubhouse before continuing their tour of the devastated city. Shortly before 11 o'clock, rescuers faced a new peril. The adjoining waterboard depot was showing alarming movement in a brick wall facing onto the site. Engineers believed it would topple if heavy machinery was brought up to the debris. After a short conference, work on the club stopped as attention turned to the depot. Within an hour, excavators had all but obliterated the east side of the building. With time now so much against survival for anyone trapped in the club, work resumed at a punishing pace. Many involved in the operation had not taken a break since the quake, but they pushed on, always mindful of the danger, not only to themselves, but those possible survivors. After almost 30 hours work by 260 personnel, the rescuers have broken into the basement tomb. It's been confirmed that bodies have been sighted down there. How many, we're not sure at this stage. However, work is continuing slowly as rescuers hope against hope they may still find survivors. At 4 o'clock, police rescue crews brought out 2 bodies, an elderly man and an elderly woman. But even as they carried those victims to the surface for placement at a temporary morgue, they were making preparations to return to the basement to free another body visible in the wreckage.
There are still a number of people that are unaccounted for, according to our records, and it'll be a matter of pulling the building to pieces and looking to see what we can find. Very shortly, the construction people are going to snip the roof off the building and topple a wall. And once that happens, the whole roof and western section of the building will fall, and we don't know what consequences it will have inside. So there will be nobody allowed in the building whilst this is going on. We have to take the roof out of the way. It is creating a danger for the rescuers, and once we get the roof out of the way, we alleviate our danger, we can start breaking the slabs up and going in underneath.
Even after their grim discoveries, rescuers are clinging to the faint hope of still finding survivors.
As we saw in San Francisco with the earthquake, there's always a chance, and we haven't given up hope at this stage.
Much of the collapsed concrete roof was brought down overnight, leaving the main auditorium, a huge amphitheatre, the stage opening into nothingness. The careful operation of wrecking the building continued, and although the monstrous machines ate through the rubble like spaghetti, it was still a painfully slow job. The work was frustrating as there were still enormous slabs of concrete which had to be cleared before the real work of looking for victims could go on. Rescuers ventured into the rubble numerous times with heat detectors but failed to pick up any sign of life. There are 6 Newcastle people unaccounted for. It is known they frequent the club, but it's not certain they were inside when the quake struck. It's also possible that others from out of town may have been visiting the club when it collapsed. The main find of the day occurred this afternoon and set off a new frenzy of activity.
It would appear that the machinery have uncovered some motor vehicles that were found in the rubble, and they're trying to ascertain whether any persons are in them by using some heat treatment.
9 cars in all had crashed through to the floor of what was the basement. The first, flattened almost out of recognition, was lifted free late this afternoon. That car was empty. There have been reports that bodies have been seen in one of the other vehicles, but it will be some hours before workers can clear enough rubble to make a proper inspection.
Also affected are the trains. There will be no services from Newcastle to Broadmeadow till January 8. Interurban trains are either starting or terminating at Broadmeadow, while Broadmeadow-Maitland trains are running to Sunday timetables till further notice. State Rail's Wharf Road office is safe, and workers have been asked to report to the Broadmeadow train control on Tuesday morning, where they will be bussed into the city.
Now thank we all our God. Lord, you know the reason why you brought us this earthquake. We know it is you who speak to us through it, and we are searching our hearts to find your will for our lives, for this city and beyond.
Christchurch Cathedral was one of the inner city churches closed. Worshippers tried to make their way there but were halted at the barricades. Engineers say the damage to this old building is expected to exceed $250,000.
My opinion is that with all the vibrations, when it comes up through the building, it hits the top of the building here and then cracks the concrete, and then the vibrations continue to shake the parapets and they just turn on the spot.
It's also a city of crumpled homes and broken dreams, as well as stories of survival.
The bang came and hit the wall, the smoke went over, all this stuff and everything. It's all over the place now. Smothered in dust and that, and the broom went like that, backwards and forwards.
Have the engineers been here this morning?
Yeah, the police and the engineers.
And what did they say?
Well, I said first they have to demolish it. Then another fella said that they might be able to put a staple from here to that wall, the other side of the next place, and pull them together. Because this wall could go that way and his wall could go the other way.
Life has been turned upside down for people living behind the police barriers.
It's just so hard. You can't get no bread, no milk, no papers, enough to find out what's going on.
Getting out of here is a problem. A major problem. There's around approximately 5 barricades to get through. They feel, and they're probably legitimately so as far as they're concerned, they're angry about the difficulty of getting to a shop.
For some, the problems are compounded by grief.
Yeah, so I've had a loss down here in the club too. A friend that lived near me, and the husband's in hospital, but the woman was brought out there. So it just gets to you.
If anyone has their food vouchers, if you wish to go on the bus to Coles to collect your food, bus is leaving in the next 5 minutes.
The Salvation Army has started shopping trips for stranded East End residents. Those shopkeepers still open in the inner city are struggling to keep up with the demand.
I advised the people that stopped me at the time that we had food shops and we had to keep feeding the population, and unfortunately they still said I couldn't do it. Well, I broke their instructions and come down and done it anyway. The other problem's been getting supplies into the area. Even though the supplies were coming in through Derby Street end, they were told that they couldn't come down to the shop here, so they told a few fibs and said they were taking bread and milk and supplies through to the hospital. And that's how we got our supplies in, by telling a few white lies.
What about the poor old shop up on the road?
They're working on that now.
Yeah, I know, isn't it awful?
I was pleased you were open.
Oh yeah, we were open when it happened. They came and told us that they had to close the shop, so off we went.
One has to explain at every block why you're moving within the city. And it just feels a bit like you're a prisoner.
Even a Canberra-based seismologist has a story to tell of what he was doing when the earthquake struck.
Well, I looked at the other guy and then jumped up from the morning tea table where we just sat down to have coffee and raced outside to the front office where all the seismographs are located. I could hear the needle on the Canberra seismograph just going bang, 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 bang from side to side.
Seismologists now know the quake's epicentre was at the heart of Hamilton. This was confirmed when a small aftershock struck the same area on Friday night. There's no way of predicting if more aftershocks will follow. The experts can only go on past experience.
If you ask 6 seismologists, you'd get 6 different answers, but I think there's still a chance over the next 2 weeks.
Earthquakes aren't new to Newcastle. 2 of a similar intensity to Thursday's struck in 1868 and 1925. Yet the city is not included in the seismic risk area put together by the Standards Association of Australia. Kevin McHugh says that situation could now change, meaning an introduction of new building codes. Despite the fears of some, seismologists believe mine subsidence had nothing to do with the extent of the city's devastation. One Cook's Hill man, however, came home to a living room which had collapsed into a 135-metre deep mine shaft.
Yeah, I just saw the piano and everything teetering on this brink of this hole.
and everything upstairs as well has been sucked down the roof, and all the windows have been blown in.
So the only we've seen is still
it's just a bit of a shock.
Well, basically you have an air shaft from an old mine working. That was, when it was completed, the mining there, it was capped with concrete. When the building was built over that, there was a concrete slab put over that. From what we understand, what's happened, water from the water table as a result of the earthquake has been pushed up. It's lifted that concrete plug and then it's sucked back down. And you can see from the damage around, and particularly out the front, that everything around the house and particularly in here has then been sucked in to the hole.
Are there others like this in the city?
As I said, there are only 2, 3, perhaps 4 around the whole area like this, and particularly this size.
And have you established that there is no problems with those shafts?
Well, as far as we know, there's no problems, yes.
Roadblocks and barricades have been established throughout the inner city, with many of its buildings still deemed dangerous. This morning, the NBN helicopter was sent up with a physical evidence policeman and a cameraman on board in a bid to gain an overall view of the destruction. Meanwhile, police have been forced to issue a public plea for people to stay away from the International Sports Stadium after huge crowds flocked there this morning in a bid to acquire special passes. The passes will give people access into the inner city areas, however will only be issued to those who can prove their business in that area is vital. A black cat on an empty street, a sobering symbol of what New Year's Eve 1989 was to Newcastle. With much of its CBD crumbling, the heart of the city was a no-go zone. The only splash of colour in the normally busy streets, police barricades to stop the public venturing into town. For police manning the roadblocks, it was a lonely New Year's Eve, the most reported little trouble with sightseers. Inside the barricades, inner city residents did their best to bring some cheer to their crumbling suburbs. Church Street's people gathered for an outdoor dinner in the grounds of the Catholic ministry. With picnic baskets and champagne, they made a peaceful, intimate picture among the ruins, many their own homes. And in Lehman Street, Cook's Hill, a small group set up camp on the road without fear of interruption, only needing to pause from their chatter at midnight to listen to the City Hall clock chime the dawning of the 90s, a hollow sound in the empty streets. But barely a kilometre from the last line of barricades, it was a vastly different picture. Forced out of the usual popular city night spots, more than 3,000 revellers thronged to Merriweather to the Beach Hotel. Despite the size of the crowd and a strong police presence, there were no reports of trouble. Only a handful of people were arrested for drunkenness. But such a huge celebration didn't come without its setbacks. The scene that greeted cleaners this morning was hardly different to that of some of the devastated inner city areas, though cleaning up this mess was a far easier task. Now Jodie McKay on just how the clean-up in the quake-stricken city is going. A black cat on an empty street, a sobering symbol of what New Year's Eve 1989 was to Newcastle. With much of its CBD crumbling, the heart of the city was a no-go zone. The only splash of colour in the normally busy streets, police barricades to stop the public venturing into town. For police manning the roadblocks, it was a lonely New Year's Eve, the most reported little trouble with sightseers. Inside the barricades, inner city residents did their best to bring some cheer to their crumbling suburbs. Church Street's people gathered for an outdoor dinner in the grounds of the Catholic ministry. With picnic baskets and champagne, they made a peaceful, intimate picture among the ruins, many their own homes. And in Lehman Street, Cook's Hill, a small group set up camp on the road without fear of interruption, only needing to pause from their chatter at midnight to listen to the City Hall clock chime the dawning of the 90s, a hollow sound in the empty streets. Barely a kilometre from the last line of barricades, it was a vastly different picture. Forced out of the usual popular city night spots, more than 3,000 revellers thronged to Merriweather to the Beach Hotel. Despite the size of the crowd and a strong police presence, there were no reports of trouble. Only a handful of people were arrested for drunkenness. But such a huge celebration didn't come without its setbacks. The scene that greeted cleaners this morning was hardly different to that of some of the devastated inner city areas, though cleaning up this mess was a far easier task. Now Jodie McKay on just how the clean-up in the quake-stricken city is going.
The marathon is a gruelling race, but just getting 250 windsurfers started is a difficult job in itself. After several false starts and uncomfortable collisions, the swarm of butterfly wings was at last away. Marathon sailboarding is definitely not a spectator sport. After the impressive start, the riders quickly disappear on a lonely 51-kilometre voyage. Conditions this afternoon were perfect with a brisk 12-knot sou'easter. Any stronger and many of the sailors wouldn't have had the strength to hold on for the distance. There are no thoughts of pacing yourself in this race, especially since, for safety reasons, only the first 100 past the first checkpoint are permitted to continue. The board riders pull against the wind for 4.5 long hours, stepping off just 3 times for officials to check sail numbers. The race has 4 weight divisions and a women's division. 3 locals are expected to do well in the event. Chris Lawrence, who is chasing his 5th world title, is favourite in the lightweight division. Adam Quinn should make a strong showing in the light heavyweight, as should Greg Beecham and Andrew Reagan in the heavyweight class. The first sailors are expected to cross the line shortly.